Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and TMNT Out of the Shadows are the first two films in a supposed three-film reboot. The first film was criticized for being dull and boring, lacking both imagination and fun, but it didn't do too badly at the box office. In the second film, they attempted to correct these errors, and the film received better reviews but had a worse box office reception, and so the third film was cancelled. So, if the second film was better, then why did it do so badly? Well, the first reboot film received a lot of advertising and hype. This made people want to see it at the cinemas, and so it did okay at the box office. However, the audience wasn't happy, and so when the second film came out, no matter how much hype it was given, the audience just wasn't excited enough to go and see it. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were created in 1984 by two comic book enthusiasts who were just having fun and trying to make each other laugh. They took their enthusiasm and their fun idea and developed it into a comic book. The excitement they put into the project could be felt in the comic book itself, and readers also became enthused. When the first film was created in 1990, the excitement felt by all the crew and production team involved was also apparent, and even though the Turtles just looked like men in suits with mechanical animatronic heads, the people were excited to see them. This excited energy is what the reboot films are missing. Some people say that the reason for this lack of excitement is because they went from using practical effects to using digital effects, and that digital effects lack the soul that practical effects have. And while we don't think this is the reason the films didn't do well, there may be a vein of truth in this. Mechanical things have a certain something that electronic things don't. An analog wristwatch versus a digital one, a steam train versus an electric one, or an old digital radio against a digital tuner. The mechanical versions give us a warm, intriguing feeling, whilst their digital counterparts leave us cold. This feeling isn't a lack of soul, but rather a lack of understanding. With something mechanical, it's easier to imagine the workings. We can assume one thing physically turns another, which pushes something else and achieves a result. With digital, you push something and achieve a result, but the mechanics are invisible and kind of mysterious, and so it's harder to picture, and the mechanics feel more fanciful and less real. However, once you begin to understand how digital things work, you begin to appreciate them more, and then you realize that the digital versions aren't that different to their mechanical versions. This also translates to special effects. The digital effects used in the reboot films are actually surprisingly similar to the practical effects used back in 1990, and the teams responsible for the VFX in the reboot films were just as excited and enthusiastic as the teams who worked on the originals. In the 1990 film, actors were put into latex suits that were made by Jim Henson Creature Shop. There were two versions, one with an animatronic head that made the suit 60 pounds heavier, and another for action scenes that had no animatronics and was therefore lighter. These suits had to be repaired every day because they got damaged whilst filming, and because the actors would get incredibly hot inside them, and their sweat would also damage the suit. In the reboot films, Industrial Light and Magic also put actors into specially made suits, IMO-cap suits. These suits were breathable, lightweight, and didn't have to be repaired constantly. Whereas in the 90s film, the actors' movements in the physical suit were captured in principal photography, in the reboot films, the actors' movements were captured and a digital suit was added in post. The animatronic head in the original films was actually controlled by an off-camera puppeteer who also did the voice. The suit itself had a receiver, a battery pack, and a computer hidden in the shell, these connected to the animatronic head and mechanics and servos to move different areas of the face, and two speakers, one to hear the puppeteer and another to hear everyone else. The puppeteer has 9 different controls on his left joystick and 6 on the right. In the reboot films, the actor's facial performance was captured by 2 head-mounted cameras and dots painted on the actor's face. This information was translated into a digital version of the actor. Animators could then take this performance and translate it into their CG puppet face. whereas in the 1990s they used servos, wires and cables so the puppeteer could control the turtles' facial movements. In the reboot films, ILM animators used digital wires and cables known as rigging and the animation controls to control facial movements in order to mimic the actor's performance. Splinter in the original film wasn't a guy in a suit, he was a full animatronic puppet controlled by 3 different puppeteers. One controlled the arm movements, one controlled the head movements, and one controlled all the facial movements. The modern equivalent would be Krang from TMNT Out of the Shadows, who was a full CG puppet and was actually built in a similar way to the Splinter puppet. Both puppets start with a skeleton, then a muscle and fat layer is sculpted, and then texture and colour are added. So CG assets are just physical puppets in a digital world. Animators are just digital puppeteers, and digital effects are just practical effects made in a world that, for better or for worse, has little or no limitations. So if the effects teams were enthusiastic about the project, why do the films seem so dull? Well, the truth is that even though the TMNT reboot films were new and exciting for almost everyone involved, the concept, story and characters weren't. They were reboots, redos, going over the same terrain again, trying to improve it but losing one of the most important things the films had, the feeling of something new and original. Please let us know if you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up if you did. Don't forget the links to the music used in this video are in the video description, and let us know in the comments which movie VFX you'd like to know more about next.